The notion that a leader from one of the world's poorest and most embattled nations could unsettle the most powerful international institutions once seemed far-fetched. Yet, in recent years, the rise of Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso has forced even the most skeptical observers to reconsider what sovereignty means in the 21st century. His leadership has consistently defied expectations, resisting Western dominance, reconfiguring alliances, and inspiring new conversations across Africa. It is in this context that an event of enormous symbolic and geopolitical weight occurred: the issuance of an arrest warrant by Interpol against Traoré. What was intended as a measure of containment, a sign that international law enforcement could neutralize a young revolutionary leader, instead backfired spectacularly. The attempt not only reinforced Traoré's stature among his supporters, but also exposed the fragility of Western influence in Africa, sending ripples across a world already shifting toward multipolarity. To grasp why such a move would backfire so quickly, one must understand the perception of Interpol itself in Africa. Established as a tool for transnational policing, it has often been viewed as neutral and technocratic. Yet, in the eyes of many Africans, especially those who have lived through the history of colonialism and post-colonial manipulation, the organization is anything but neutral. When its red notices target leaders or activists who challenge Western power structures, they are seen not as legitimate legal measures, but as extensions of foreign pressure. In the case of Ibrahim Traoré, this perception was magnified. Far from diminishing his authority, the warrant instantly elevated him into the pantheon of resistance figures, placing him in a lineage of African leaders targeted not for crimes against their people, but for daring to confront external domination. The warrant, regardless of its technical basis, was quickly interpreted as political. In Ouagadougou, in Bamako, in Niamey, and across the broader Sahel, citizens understood it as an attack not only on one man, but on the aspirations of entire nations seeking autonomy. Crowds gathered chanting Traoré's name, hoisting his image alongside that of Thomas Sankara, and declaring their refusal to allow foreign powers to dictate the destiny of Burkina Faso. What should have been a quiet administrative move turned into a lightning rod for mobilization. Every television station, every radio broadcast, every WhatsApp group buzzed with debates about why the West felt so threatened by a young African captain who chose to govern with defiance. The backfire was immediate because it struck at the heart of legitimacy. Traoré, for all his controversial decisions, is widely seen in Burkina Faso and parts of Africa as a man of the people. His rhetoric of dignity and sovereignty resonates in societies long stripped of both. When Interpol moved against him, it was not understood as law enforcement, but as the policing of African dreams. Instead of weakening him, it gave him proof that his fight was real, that his adversaries were not only insurgents on the battlefield, but institutions embedded in the structures of global power. His supporters framed the warrant as a badge of honor, evidence that he had rattled the pillars of Western control. At the international level, the warrant also revealed deep fractures. While some Western governments quietly applauded the move, other powers, Russia, China, Turkey, and even sections of the Arab world, expressed skepticism or silence. They recognized that aligning with such a warrant would alienate them from a continent where resentment toward Western overreach runs deep. Even within Africa, regional blocs split. Some leaders feared that endorsing such measures would one day be turned against them, while others sought to capitalize on Traoré's popularity to strengthen their own political narratives. The very instrument intended to isolate him ended up isolating those who supported the warrant, exposing the erosion of consensus around Western-dominated institutions. The speed of the backfire also came from the symbolic timing. Africa today is in a period of awakening. Across the Sahel, from Mali to Niger to Burkina Faso, military-led governments have taken power with promises to end foreign meddling, secure their territories, and reclaim resources. For decades, leaders who took similar stances were swiftly removed, whether by coups, sanctions, or covert operations. But in this generation, with social media amplifying every speech, every image, every confrontation, silencing such figures has become harder. When the warrant against Traore was announced, it was instantly reframed not as a legal document, but as a battle cry. Memes circulated portraying him as a lion chased by the hunters of imperialism. Songs were written, speeches delivered, and demonstrations organized. The warrant itself faded into bureaucratic obscurity, while its unintended consequences roared across the continent. One must also consider the historical memory that shapes African reactions. The people of Burkina Faso, in particular, recall vividly the assassination of Thomas Sankara in 1987, an act widely believed to have involved foreign collusion. They know the stories of Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, and countless others who fell because they dared to question external dominance. Against this backdrop, the Interpol warrant was not seen as a legal measure, but as the opening move in a familiar playbook. And this time, the people were determined not to let history repeat itself without resistance. The streets of Ouagadougou echoed with chants that made clear, "If they come for Traore, they come for us all." From a strategic perspective, the Backfire also demonstrates how global power is shifting. In the unipolar world that followed the Cold War, institutions like Interpol operated with little challenge. Today, in an emerging multipolar order, their legitimacy is no longer guaranteed. As Africa cultivates ties with new partners, as alternative financial systems develop, and as regional alliances deepen, the authority of Western-dominated institutions is waning. The attempt to use Interpol against Traore highlighted this decline. Instead of cowing him into compliance, it underscored the limited reach of those who issued it. In practice, no African state willing to defy Western pressure would dare arrest him. Indeed, many would offer protection, seeing in him a symbol of their own struggles. The Backfire further exposed contradictions in Western rhetoric. For years, Western leaders have championed the language of democracy, sovereignty, and rule of law. Yet, when a leader emerges who insists on sovereignty, who questions exploitative contracts, who demands dignity for his people, he becomes a target. This double standard does not go unnoticed. African citizens increasingly ask why Western-backed leaders accused of corruption or repression face no warrants, while those who challenge the status quo do. This hypocrisy undermines the moral authority of those issuing the warrants, leaving their actions to be interpreted as power politics rather than principled law enforcement. Another dimension of the Backfire lies in the way Traore himself responded. Rather than retreating into silence or panic, he seized the moment. His speeches framed the warrant as evidence of foreign fear, declaring that if standing for African sovereignty makes him a criminal in their eyes, then he embraces the accusation proudly. He reminded his people that their ancestors faced colonial prisons and chains, and that the struggle for freedom has always carried risks. By turning vulnerability into strength, he transformed the warrant into a weapon of rhetoric. His words were broadcast across Africa, each phrase deepening his stature. Far from appearing cornered, he appeared emboldened. The regional response was equally telling. Mali and Niger, already aligned with Burkina Faso in the alliance of Sahel states, issued statements of solidarity. They declared that any attempt to undermine Traore would be considered an attack on them as well. This unprecedented unity transformed what might have been an isolated incident into a regional confrontation. The warrant thus accelerated the very process it was meant to prevent, the consolidation of anti-Western alliances in the Sahel. With every attempt to isolate one leader, the collective defiance of the bloc grew stronger, creating a dynamic where pressure on one state binds the others more tightly together. Globally, the warrant sparked debate about the future of international institutions. Can bodies like Interpol maintain credibility when their actions are seen as politicized? Should African states continue to participate in organizations perceived as extensions of foreign control? Voices across the continent began calling for the creation of African-led policing and security institutions, less vulnerable to manipulation. If such ideas gain momentum, the warrant against Traore may ultimately be remembered as the catalyst for deeper institutional independence. The backfire also has an emotional dimension. To the young people of Burkina Faso, who make up the majority of the population, Traore represents possibility. Many of them were born into a world where Western powers dictated the economic and security agenda of their country. To see their leader stand defiant, even under international pressure, inspires them to believe that their future can be different. The warrant, intended to weaken their confidence, instead deepened their attachment. It fed the narrative of a leader persecuted for their sake, a man willing to risk everything for their dignity. Such emotional bonds cannot be legislated away, and once forged, they form the foundation of enduring legitimacy. In the broader African diaspora, too, the warrant resonated. From Paris to New York, Africans living abroad watched with indignation as yet another leader from their continent was targeted. Social media amplified their voices, connecting struggles across continents. Traore became a symbol not only for Burkina Faso, but for Africans worldwide who long for a break from cycles of domination. What Interpol framed as law enforcement became in the eyes of the diaspora, proof that African sovereignty still threatens global hierarchies. It is worth considering the irony that this backfire creates for the West. By targeting Traore through Interpol, they sought to delegitimize him. Instead, they delegitimized themselves. By trying to silence his voice, they amplified it. By attempting to isolate him, they globalized his cause. This paradox reflects a deeper truth of the 21st century. Power is no longer measured solely by institutions, but by narratives. And in the realm of narratives, the warrant transformed Traore from a regional figure into an international symbol of resistance. The future of this saga remains uncertain. Will Interpol double down, issuing new notices and pressuring African governments to comply? Will Burkina Faso withdraw from participation in such institutions, joining the chorus of states questioning their value? Will this episode encourage other leaders to adopt similarly defiant stances, believing that persecution only strengthens their legitimacy? What is certain is that the warrant cannot achieve its intended purpose. Traore will not be arrested by his own people, nor by allies who share his struggle. The legal document may exist on paper, but in practice, it is a phantom, an empty gesture carrying more symbolic than material weight. In the end, the backfire of the Interpol warrant against Ibrahim Traore is more than a political miscalculation. It is a reflection of a world in transition. Institutions that once commanded automatic obedience now face skepticism and resistance. Leaders once expected to cower under international pressure now transform that pressure into fuel. Nations once resigned to subordination now test the boundaries of sovereignty. And in this shifting terrain, the actions intended to contain defiance often end up accelerating it. Ibrahim Traore may or may not endure as a long-term leader. His policies may succeed or falter. His country may thrive or continue to struggle. But what cannot be denied is that in this moment, through this episode, he has captured the imagination of millions. The warrant, meant to diminish him, has instead immortalized him in the annals of resistance. For the West, the tremors of this backfire are a warning. The tools of yesterday no longer guarantee the results of tomorrow. For Africa, it is a reminder that sovereignty, once asserted, can transform even attempts at repression into symbols of liberation. The story of this warrant, therefore, is not about paperwork in an international office. It is about the resurgence of dignity, the defiance of dependency, and the awakening of a continent unwilling to bow quietly. It is about a young captain who dared to lead, and about the institutions that, in trying to silence him, gave him an even louder voice. And it is about the future, where the balance of power is shifting, where narratives shape legitimacy as much as laws, and where the dreams of millions cannot be arrested with a red notice.